Folks, welcome to The Real Health with me, Karl Henry, in association with Lay Healthcare. It is unprecedented times. We know that, especially this week after the address from An Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. People are anxious, people are worried, and people are concerned all around the country. So today is the first of two episodes this week. On tomorrow's episode, we are chatting to Minister for Health, Simon Harris, and he will give us all the updates that we need to know. And for today's episode, I'm delighted and honoured to be joined by someone who I call a friend, and in times like these, he's the perfect person to give us all the advice and tips that we need to help us through these times. It's clinical psychologist, Dr. Eddie Murphy. Eddie, how are you?
Karl, hi. Good to be able to talk to individuals today because obviously there's concern. You can feel that tension in the country. There's a level of fear and anxiety. And I know that every Monday and Thursday at 9 o'clock on my own Facebook page, I do a live piece to try and support people around the level of anxiety and fear. So if you want to go over there at 9 o'clock on a Monday and a Thursday. But I suppose really what I'd like to be able to talk about is a couple of things around the nature of anxiety and fear and threat and worry. I'd like to be able to talk about how we can manage that. Then some ways that we can really support each other as well. So understandably, I'm in healthcare 30 years, we've never faced anything like this. And I think the Taoiseach's call last night reflected, I thought it was a very good sign of leadership, because it reflected a lot of the concerns that people were having, acknowledged that we're all like a link in the chain, so we are. If the person who's now working in our supermarket, to the person who's doing logistics, to the individual who's and our healthcare staff, frontline, and those supporting the frontline, we're all part of this community. We're all part of this chain to try and what we call flatten the curve. I work in the health service. I'm in work today, and we're looking at systems about supporting the community and supporting our frontline workers as well.
And talk to us about frontline staff. So, like, you're very much on the ground. I've been at home for the last kind of 4 or 5 days. I've been out running, and the biggest extent I've had with interaction is waving to the person on the other side of the road as I run. How are people handling it on the front line? Like, what is the mood and work?
Well, look, it's challenging, but I feel that there's a lot of individuals supporting each other, putting their shoulder to the wheel and trying to ensure that that we're part of. There's both fear and engagement. You see, when you have a threat, COVID, this coronavirus, is coming as a threat, and in a way, it's a societal threat to the individual, our family units, and everybody. And when we get threatened, we get our adrenaline levels, our stress levels go up, our adrenaline levels go up, and it impacts on our sleep, on our waking, on our mood. Prolonged periods of stress, our mood can drop. There's some specialist populations, we say, who would be with OCD or have health anxiety, or in vulnerable populations. Older adults, like I think our adults over 65 can feel particularly vulnerable. Can I just pause there?
Yeah.
An email come up for me there. You do see that in the window, no?
No.
Okay, that's grand. I know you had. No, it's just like work emails coming through.
No, you're fine.
It's just sort of, from a GDPR issue, I just want to make sure. Can I just drop my head and turn off my phone, because I'm afraid I didn't turn it off.
Go on.
Okay.
Sorry, Dara. Whoever's at home with Dara. Hi.
I'm afraid of my life. I was going to try to do it.
This is just the maddest thing.
Okay.
The life is
so, in terms of frontline workers,
where were we at there?
You're asking about frontline workers.
Yeah, so talk to us about frontline workers in terms of the stress that they're under.
So, frontline workers, even though I often think healthcare professionals are, while we're in a professional role in that space, and our doctors, nurses, healthcare attendants, porters, all individuals that are supporting the effort, but also individually, there's fear there, and because they're families, and we know, you see, there's been a lot of learning from China and Italy that we're trying to bring back and trying to use that learning in our system. And I suppose that's one of the key messages I want to get out today is, where do we get our information from?
Yeah.
Because we're like hoovering up information from everywhere, and because under threat, we're trying to hoover up information. And what we need to, I believe, focus on real information and limit the other stuff. The real information, and encourage people to go to hse.ie and go to reputable news resources, and then close down, as in limit what you're watching to ensure that you're not. So, because even Taoiseach last night talked about not sharing messages that were unsourced, and so we know that there's unsourced information going out there, and we know that if you're going to reduce your anxiety, and here's a good psychological tip, because I want your viewers and listeners to know that checking behavior actually amplifies our anxiety.
Okay, so the quantity of time we spend checking social media, checking news accounts, different accounts, whatever, so that amplifies how anxious we are getting.
That does amplify. Checking behavior and anxiety amplifies our fear. It feeds into it. So what we need is, we still need that information, I would say. So check in, do a once a day check in, and then that's it. Stop. Pause it at that point.
And a way to do that might be tying in with the news cycle, which is maybe 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock.
That's the way I do it. I sort of check in. I'll hit one of those, 6 or 9, and that's all I need to know. Because believe me, if something else happens, you'll be told about it. It's reality, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the first point for our listeners is very much it's get yourself into a news cycle that's from a trusted source, that is not all day long, but it's either 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 9. And that's a mistake I do myself. I'm on my phone too much at the moment, and you're looking for news cycles all the time, and it's much easier to pull back a little bit and focus on a particular time structure.
Yeah. Structure now, that's a great word, because we're looking at some of the research studies from people who have been in isolation, and as we move towards more social isolation, at the moment we're in social distancing and hand washing, some of the very key messages, but and people will be moving into social isolation. And some of the psychological research studies on social isolation are talking about having routines and structures, and that's important around sleep, and particularly around stress management. Sleep is critical. It's a bedrock of our stress management system, and having this routine and structure, getting up at the same time. Now we're out of the Paddy's Day cycle. We've children at home, so we're trying to structure the day the way a day would look normally, so that there's work component of the day, be productive component of the day, and then work, rest, and play, as it were. And so the work piece would be around doing something productive. That can mean trying to structure your day rather than just letting it all into free vent, because the time will go very slow if you're into that space. Whereas doing and a productive activity will support the individual developing a routine. Mm-hmm. Then good nutrition, obviously. And then exercise. I believe exercise, Karl, still plays an incredibly important role. And I don't know whether you're going to put on some of your famous home videos for people to follow.
Yeah, we've seen a huge increase in demand for stuff. So, in terms of listeners, we are recommending all the Operation Transformation stuff is live continuously. The app is there. It's free to download. All the workouts are there for people to download, which is great. And, I exercise is a crucial component of getting through this healthily. There's no question about it.
And I see
for those at home who are, and I think off the back of last night after the address, it was very charismatic and the leadership was fantastic. But there are people who are genuinely getting afraid. Let's talk about those who are listening in, who are worried, who are concerned, who are afraid, and what they can do to manage that. So we've looked at news sources, we've looked at structure. What else can they do?
So when we look at sleep and then the role that exercise plays, I see your car as an isolation pod that you can get into your car. If people that have cars or on bikes, get out, because if you're on a bike and you're cycling singly, or if you're in a car, you can go to a place and then get out for a walk. And that's some of the activities that we're looking at, is in terms of having some of that physical exercise. I find myself I would get pent up if I don't get out and do some movement.
Okay, so get out while get out, make each day have something to do, have a place to go that complies with all the government guidelines. To just get out, and that's something we found very beneficial. Each day we're out somewhere doing something, and just that break from the house space is really powerful
and necessary in a way. So I don't want to be Pollyanna about this either, right? People are in real situations. So a lot of people, 140,000 people have lost their work. So it's been, so this is a societal response where there's a requirement for, if you think about, we look at this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of need, and we look at having shelter, food, and that's probably explained some of the panic buying that occurred last week. And we know that the supply chain is good, but there probably will be both ripples of that again at other times. That have housing. So the whole area of rent, people will be worried about the rent and worried about their mortgages and worried about the financial income as well as the health worries. So there's certain things. The piece I would say there is what's in our control and what's not in our control. Okay, this is how I think, what is in our control? Because if we worry and catastrophize, then we're going to worry about everything. We've very little control over some of that. What we can control is we can control our hand washing. We can control our social distancing. We can control what we call our social units. Our social units is like your family is a unit, and my family is my unit, say, and our unit. And how do we manage that other people are not connecting with our unit? Trying to manage down that risk. Mm-hmm. In our house, my wife has recovered from cancer, and she gave me permission to talk about this. We hadn't talked about it up to now, but she's a vulnerable person. She's immunosuppressed post chemotherapy, so we would have a lot of concern, and we're doing social isolation. So I would be very scrutinous about the work. When I come back from work, I'm totally, washing and all the rest of it. So that's really important that so you can see the fear. Like, fear is genuine there. So, but what is in our control and what's outside of our control? And I think that's a good way of looking at things. And then because when you start taking action on what's in your sphere of influence, then you're in a space where you can manage that.
And let's talk about the power of, I heard it on the radio this morning, and I thought it was a good point, is the power of video now. Yeah. In terms of that interaction and the sense of, I suppose, wellness, security that comes from being able to see somebody, if you are isolated at home, no matter what age you are, that using video calls, getting WhatsApp, getting FaceTime or whatever, is a really powerful tool to keep yourselves well because you're able to visually talk to somebody.
Well, I think this is going to be transformative, actually, this COVID-19, because we've never faced anything like this. And I think a lot of all the things about how we worked, how we communicated, or, in this incredible time, we've also got incredible tools. And the whole medical community worldwide and the scientific community worldwide is now amplified and focused on solving this tricky problem. And this tricky problem requires a multifaceted approach where a lot of people are putting their energies into trying to solve it. And having the tools such as the gene sequencing, the technology to talk to each other, the ability to WhatsApp, the ability for us to be able to, you're in Dublin, I'm in the Midlands, that we're able to talk, and able to, and then people can look at this and go, hold on now, there's 3 questions I'm going to ask myself. What's in my control? What can I control? And that will reduce your anxiety. Mm-hmm. Stopping and breathing. Because I guarantee you, if you're the listener and you're looking at this, and if you take notice of where your breathing is, if you're stressed, you're breathing in the upper part of your chest. If you want to really try and slow things down, you try and move to abdominal breathing. Slowing it down, taking a nice deep breath in, and centering yourself. And sometimes we just have to center ourselves. Because we're facing adversity, but we've also overcome adversity. Many people have faced adversity and overcome it. and people will overcome this adversity as well.
Folks, you're listening to Real Health with me, Karl Henry, in association with Lay Healthcare. It's Dr. Eddie Murphy giving us really simple tips to stay positive, to stay mentally well in these really, really demanding times. Eddie, what if people listening in already struggle with mental health before this, and this as it is exasperating the effects of what they're suffering? What can they do?
So that's a big challenge, because people who are worried will excessively worry more. So I encourage them to reconnect, or if they've disconnected, because often now their therapists and counsellors are working through phone-based methods, and this is the whole area about the technology piece and about our connection. And really, it's about, a lot of people would highlight this sword and shield, the negative effects and positive effects of social media. But what we can see now is, and the technology is allowing us to connect. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And for individuals with mental health difficulties, it's about connecting. Now, we can't leave people behind. I sort of see, I was at an amazing talk once, and but used, clips, you'd see climbing clips, Karl. What are they called there?
Oh, crampons.
Crampons, yeah. And so we're all like, if you imagine everybody in Ireland is a crampon, and we all join together. That's how strong our chain is. And we start pulling apart, then it start weakens. And in a way, we've got to see that there are members of society maybe that don't have the technology, that we might have to reach out to, that we might have to support in terms of shopping, in terms of connecting, because social isolation is a significant impact on low mood.
Okay, so bring people with you, and obviously surrounding yourself with positive people will be very important there.
Well, surrounding yourself with people, and I think having limits on the conversations around this, because the conversations around COVID are generally anxiety-orientated conversations, and there's nothing new in that conversation. It needs to be had. But just say we're going to speak for 40 minutes or something like that with a friend, or 20 minutes or in a phone call. Let's do 5 or 10 minutes on COVID, and then pause it and say, like, actively make a decision. Now that's it. We cover that. We're not going to recycle it again, and let's talk about something else.
Okay, good. So again, it's putting your, I suppose, to summarize what we've chatted about so far, control and structure are some of the key words around it in terms of managing anxiety. And that's another sign of it there, which is put a structure on your day. So put a COVID-free hour where you don't talk about it, you don't look at it, you don't think about it, and you go and do something else or talk about other stuff or whatever.
Well, okay, so if you don't think about it, it actually will pop through, because it's a catastrophizing, it's an intrusive thought. So you might have to manage that piece, because if you say don't think about something, it's like having a window open on a computer. It's still running in the background. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's about trying to focus on, if you actively focus on other stuff. So I know there's some brilliant stuff happening. Alison Spittle there has a movie on Netflix at 9 o'clock every night, and people are chiming in on that. There's Samantha Kelly, a tweeting goddess, has hashtag social isolation, and they've set up individuals to support people who are socially isolated. And I can tell you, the ingenuity of the Irish people is going to come through here in terms of lifting giving us moments in adversity where we lift our mood. And humour is another role that we'll be calling upon, because and dark or black or gallows humour, whatever way you phrase it, it's particularly used in healthcare and emergency medical area. And it's a way of coping as well with this distress as well.
Okay, so if people have more questions, or people want to kind of keep in touch with you, the live Facebook sessions are happening it's Monday and...
So Monday and Thursday at 9 o'clock on Facebook Live. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to go there to try and support individuals. Big response. I was overwhelmed with the response. And it's really about giving practical advice around how to manage fears, anxieties, worries. And we'll be talking as we go through, because like, how do you talk to children around this area? How do you talk to teenagers? And it's an evolving situation.
On that, in terms of, I suppose, practical tips for discussing it with children, what advice would you have there?
So for children then, like, just to use an aged piece, and we talk about developmentally appropriate. So under 10, I think if a kid asks a question, kids are worried, right? Because they pick up their worry on where we're at. So under 10, I would say, if they ask a question, give them the response, and give them, I often say, layer it with reassurance that scientists all over the world now are trying to solve this tricky problem, and they're getting there. So they are. Every day there's more and more news about how they're getting there. That's the one to the under 10-year-old. So you answer the response. So in our house, like, we've had tough questions. Like, mommy going to die from this? Is what percentage is she going to die? Or what percentage is, so kids are very factual. Now, kids are worried often about their own, like, who's going to look after me if all the adults pop your clogs? They're very, but kids will name it, right? So, for the older children, then you just give more information, right? And in a way that, but also again, layer it with, this is the information, this is the information, and layer it with the extra reassurance piece.
Okay. And I know you are very proactive in social media, so if people want to follow you on Instagram, Twitter, what are your accounts?
So Dr. Eddie on Twitter, Dr. Eddie Murphy, and Facebook, Dr. Eddie Murphy, clinical psychologist, and Dr. Eddie Murphy on Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Eddie Murphy, thank you for joining us on Real Health. I'm very glad to call you a friend and to have you on my WhatsApp group to keep me sane and less anxious in these times. Your tips are really good, and they're very much about control. And no doubt over the course of the coming weeks and months, we'll have you on again at some stage as this grows or escalates or whatever it may be. Mental health is going to be absolutely crucial. So mental health is so important.
So in the HSE, we're really aware that the growing need around mental health responding in the context of, we've been planning, while we haven't been planning for COVID, we have planned for crisis situations, and to scale up people to respond. We call it psychosocial responding, and we do a thing called psychological first aid. And there's some really information out there on the WHO and UN websites around supporting individuals with psychological first aid. It's a growing area. We've known this for many years. Like, how we often see the what we call the medical impact will be like this peak, but the psychological impact will be for longer. And we know that from other crises over time, whether 9/11 or Grenfell Tower or the Manchester bombings. We know that there's peaks, and then the psychological impact is longer lasting. And the psychologists and the counsellors and therapists in our excellent people all over Ireland are aware of that, and we're scaled up and we're ready to respond.
And thank God for that. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us on Real Health.
Leia Healthcare, looking after you always. Proud sponsors of Real Health with Karl Henry.